I've always been the kind of woman who takes up space, not loudly, but fully. I don't apologize for being ambitious or for knowing exactly what I want. Some people admire that. Others try to tame it. Eric used to say he loved that about me, that I wasn't like the others, that I challenged him. He called me a storm in heels. I thought it was a compliment. I thought we were solid, a power couple, a perfect match. The final days before the wedding felt almost too perfect. My dress was hanging in its bag like a secret I couldn't wait to unveil. The venue was everything I'd dreamed of. Candlelight, strings, the smell of peonies. Eric was sweet, attentive. Everyone kept telling me how lucky I was, and I believed them. I let myself believe I was walking into something lasting, something safe. I even caught myself smiling at my reflection, like the world had finally aligned. But safe can be an illusion. That night, I went upstairs to grab my charger and heard laughter coming from Eric's study. The door was cracked. I wasn't eavesdropping, not really, but then I heard my name. I froze. After the honeymoon, she'll be different, Eric said, chuckling. I made a bet she'd calm down. You'll see. I'll have her trained by the first anniversary. My stomach dropped. My heart didn't just break. It rearranged itself. I didn't move. Not at first. I just stood there, gripping the banister, trying to make sense of what I'd heard. My ears rang with those words. Trained, calm down, a bet. It felt like I'd stepped out of my own life and into someone else's twisted version of it. I wanted to barge in, scream, demand answers. But something in me, that same voice that always knew when to hold the line, told me not yet. Not like this. Not until I knew what I wanted to do with the truth. So I walked back down the stairs, slowly, calmly, like I hadn't just had the rug ripped out from under me. I poured a glass of water, sat on the couch, and stared at the wall. The wedding was days away. My name was on everything, my signature, my face, my heart. And yet, in that moment, I felt like a stranger in my own story. Eric didn't love me, not the real me. He loved the idea of conquering me. And suddenly, everything about our relationship took on a darker shade. All the little comments I used to brush off came flooding back. You don't always have to lead. You're so intense sometimes. Let me handle the money stuff. I'd thought he was trying to help. Now I saw it for what it was, control, wrapped in compliments. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a project. And I was done being polite about it. The woman he thought he could mold wasn't the one he was marrying, not even close. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream or break anything or call my best friend in a panic. I just sat there, letting the silence fill the space between who I thought I was marrying and who he had just revealed himself to be. And then I made a decision. Not out of revenge, not even out of anger, but clarity. If he thought I was someone to be broken, he clearly didn't know me at all. I wasn't walking into that wedding as a victim. I'd walk in with my head held high and my eyes wide open. The next morning, I smiled as he kissed my forehead. I nodded along as he talked about the seating chart. I even said I love you when he left for work. But inside, something had shifted. I wasn't looking at my fiancé anymore. I was looking at a case study. And the more he played the doting partner, the more I knew I had made the right choice. He thought I didn't hear him. He thought I'd go through with it like nothing happened. He had no idea what I was planning. Because here's the thing about strong women. We don't just survive betrayal. We learn from it. We sharpen it into strategy. I knew I couldn't confront him yet. Not without a plan, not without precision. He thought I was something to be broken. He just realized he was something to be exposed. I carried the secret like a stone in my chest. Heavy, silent, impossible to ignore. But I didn't let it show. Not in my walk, not in my voice, not even in my smile. I greeted family, posed for photos, thanked the florist, all while rehearsing my next move in the back of my mind. Confronting Eric would have given him too much power, and honestly, I wanted more than just a fight. I wanted closure wrapped in strategy. I wanted a move so clean, so undeniable, that he'd never forget the woman he tried to reduce. That night, I texted an old friend from college, a lawyer who always said I'd make a great client one day. I didn't give her the full story. Just the parts that mattered. A prenuptial agreement, with conditions, with teeth. I wanted it to look routine, nothing flashy, just a legal safeguard, I'd say, in case something ever went wrong. But tucked inside was a clause that would be his undoing. If he ever humiliated me, manipulated me, or compromised my dignity, everything would be mine. House, shares, reputation, all of it, and he signed it. Like it was nothing. Barely read past the first page. I watched him scribble his name with that smug little smirk, the one he always wore when he thought he was being clever. I kissed him on the cheek, told him I was proud of us for being smart. He said something like, "You're learning," and laughed. God, if only he knew. He thought he'd already won. But I was just getting started. The days blurred after that, fittings, rehearsals, dinners, and through it all, I kept my composure like it was armor. No one suspected a thing. Not my friends, not my mother, and certainly not Eric. He'd lean in at night, whispering about how beautiful I'd look walking down the aisle, and I'd nod, thinking, you have no idea what I'm walking toward. Every word he spoke became another thread in the web I was weaving, calm, steady, precise. I didn't need to scream to be dangerous. I just had to wait. While others were obsessing over centerpieces and song choices, I was drafting something much more elegant, a divorce agreement. Simple. Clear. Irrevocable. It mirrored the prenup he'd already signed, with one key difference. This one had a date, our wedding date, and my signature, already penned in black ink. I left the second line blank, just for him, because when the time came, I wouldn't raise my voice. I'd raise the contract, and he'd realize the bet he made came with consequences he never saw coming. The morning of the wedding, I woke before sunrise. My hands didn't tremble. My breath stayed steady. There was something sacred about the calm I felt, like a soldier before battle, not afraid, just ready. I looked at myself in the mirror, veil in hand, and smiled. Not because I was getting married, but because I knew I wasn't walking into a trap. I was walking in with the truth. Tucked inside my clutch, next to my lipstick and vows, was the paper that would change everything. The makeup artist said I looked radiant. I thanked her. But it wasn't the foundation or the highlighter. It was the power humming just beneath my skin. As the morning unfolded, I watched everyone around me buzz with excitement. Bridesmaids fluttered with last-minute touch-ups. My mother wiped away a tear. And Eric? He texted me a photo of his cufflinks with the caption, "Can't wait to make you mine." I stared at it for a long second, then slipped my phone back into my purse, right beside the divorce contract. It felt poetic in a way. The dress, the flowers, the soft music playing in the background, all the traditional symbols of commitment, all wrapped around a secret exit. But I didn't feel like I was running. I felt like I was reclaiming something. I wasn't the one hiding anything. I wasn't the liar. I was simply prepared. Prepared to show the world what it looks like when a woman refuses to be reshaped, silenced, or sold off under the name of love. I wasn't afraid of scandal. I was afraid of regret. I looked out the window one last time before it was all set to begin. Guests arriving, cameras flashing, champagne being poured. It was all so picture perfect. But somewhere inside, that perfection sat a lie. And I was ready to bring it into the light. If he wanted to play games, I was happy to deal the last card. And, oh, what a card it would be. I stepped out of the car and onto the aisle like I was walking into a story I had rewritten in secret. Everyone turned. Eyes widened. Cameras clicked, but I didn't feel nervous, not even a little. My heart was steady, my hands still. The dress hugged me like armor, and every step I took felt like a quiet rebellion. People say brides glow. Maybe I did. But mine wasn't the glow of love. It was resolve. Pure, burning resolve. And Eric? He looked at me like he'd already won. That was almost cute. The ceremony was stunning. The music swelled. The air smelled like roses and expensive hope. I could feel the eyes of every friend, every aunt, every coworker who thought they knew our love story. Eric squeezed my hand at the altar, whispered something smug, and I smiled. Not because I believed him, but because I knew what was coming. I glanced down at the folded paper tucked into my bouquet, hidden between the stems like a secret blade. I wasn't here to be claimed. I was here to deliver a promise. My way. When the officiant asked us to share our vows, Eric went first. He called me radiant. He called me fierce. He promised to challenge me the way I challenge him. The guests sighed. Someone wiped a tear. I just watched him, not as my future husband, but as the man who'd underestimated me. And when it was my turn, I took a breath and spoke the truth in a way only I would understand. I vowed to remain exactly who I am, and never become what others expect me to be. The words came out smooth, like silk with a hidden edge. Most people in the crowd smiled, thinking it was romantic, a bride affirming her independence. But I wasn't performing for them. I was speaking directly to the man beside me, the one who thought a vow was a leash. I watched his face closely. Nothing. Just that same smug grin, the kind that says, "She's mine now." He had no clue those were the last moments he'd feel in control. And honestly, watching him sit there, so sure of himself, made me feel electric. After the vows, we were pronounced husband and wife. The crowd clapped. Eric kissed me like he was sealing a deal. And I let him. Let them all believe the fairy tale was alive and well. I posed for pictures, smiled at relatives, even danced a little at the reception. I played my part to perfection. But inside, I was counting the beats, waiting for the right moment. Because timing matters, and nothing hits harder than the truth served cold, in front of witnesses. As the night wore on, the music got louder, the drinks stronger, the crowd looser. Laughter filled the air. Toasts started rolling in, sweet, nostalgic, full of cliches about soulmates and destiny. Eric was glowing, soaking it all in like a man who believed the world had bowed to his narrative. And I was just waiting for my turn at the mic. The storm was coming, and I was its calm, standing in heels. The coordinator tapped me on the arm. "You're next." I nodded, standing slowly, savoring the silence that followed. The room dimmed just enough for the spotlight to find me. People quieted, glasses stilled midair. I looked around, not just at the faces I loved, but the ones who had doubted me, judged me, praised me. I took a breath and let the pause linger. I could feel Eric's eyes on me, expectant, proud, clueless. And then I smiled, the kind of smile that knows things others don't. Yet. I began with gratitude. Thanked the guests for their love, their presence, their support. My voice was warm, sincere, every word wrapped in velvet. I spoke about growth, about strength, about how love should never ask you to become small. I watched people nod along, mistaking my message for sentiment. But it wasn't sentiment. It was a prelude. A warning dressed as poetry. And beneath every sentence, my heart was steady, my mind clear. The paper was still in my clutch. My fingers brushed it like a trigger. Eric reached for my hand under the table. I let him hold it, just for a moment longer. He didn't know that "I do" wasn't the end of the story. It was the setup. He didn't know that behind every soft word I'd spoken, there was a current building, one that would pull the rug from under him before the night was over. I had said, "I do." But what came next would make him wish I hadn't. I stood there, glass in hand, and let the last toast settle before clearing my throat. The room hushed almost instantly. I could feel their curiosity. The bride has something to say. I smiled, not the rehearsed kind I'd worn in photos all day, but the real one. The kind that comes when you're about to burn the script and write your own ending. "Thank you all for being here," I began, steady and slow. "Tonight isn't just about love, it's about truth." I saw Eric's posture shift ever so slightly. He laughed, a nervous chuckle, like someone who's suddenly unsure of the punchline. "I know," I continued. "It's not traditional for the bride to make a speech this long, but then again, I've never been much for tradition." A few people laughed softly. I looked straight at Eric. "Before we continue, I have a surprise. Something you forgot to bet on." His face froze, just for a flicker, like he was trying to compute what I meant. But by then, I was already unfolding the paper from my clutch. "You see," I said, holding up the contract between two fingers, "this morning I signed a document. A divorce agreement. Dated. Witnessed. Ready." A collective gasp rippled through the room. I watched Eric go pale. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I turned to the guests. Eric made a bet with his friends that he could change me, tame me, break me. Word for word, he said I'd be trained by our first anniversary. Silence. then shifting chairs, then shock on every face in the room, except mine. I could hear someone whisper, "Did she just say?" And another glass clinked softly in the background. But I didn't waver. I wasn't there to embarrass him. I was there to liberate myself. "I know this isn't the ending you expected," I told the crowd, "but it's the one that was earned. Because love isn't a game, and I'm not a prize to be claimed or a project to be corrected." I looked at Eric again, and this time, I didn't see the man I almost married. I saw a cautionary tale in a tuxedo. He stood there frozen, jaw tight, eyes darting to the exit like he could run from this. But he stayed. Of course he did. Men like him always think they can talk their way out of the fire, never realizing the woman holding the match already walked through it. My voice never cracked, not once. I held up the contract like a final vow. "So, Eric, if you want out, you don't have to fight. You already signed it. And the funny thing about paperwork, it always tells the truth." Gasps turned into murmurs. The DJ stopped the music without being asked. Somewhere in the crowd, someone whispered, "She's brilliant." I didn't need applause. I didn't need tears. I only needed one thing: to be seen. Fully. Clearly. As I lifted my glass, I looked out across the sea of stunned faces and said, "To love, to honesty, and to walking away before anyone tries to clip your wings." I drank slowly, savoring the moment. Eric still hadn't moved. The room erupted, not with applause, not with cheers, but with a thick, stunned silence that said more than noise ever could. Some guests avoided my eyes. Others stared with a mix of admiration and disbelief. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I simply placed the signed contract on the head table, next to the untouched champagne flutes. Eric reached for my arm, but I pulled it back gently, not angrily, not theatrically. Just, finally. I had nothing left to explain. The truth had already done the talking. He tried to follow me as I stepped down from the mic, murmuring my name, reaching out like a man who'd just realized the floor beneath him was an illusion. But I kept walking, past the candles, the clinking silverware, the hushed chaos. Every step I took felt lighter. I wasn't escaping. I wasn't running. I was rising. And with every glance from another woman in the crowd, I knew. They understood. Maybe not the whole story, but enough to see something in me they'd once buried in themselves. By the time I reached the doors, the room was a blur of voices, questions, gasps, camera phones raised. But I didn't look back. Not because I didn't care. Because I didn't need to. He had written his part. I had written mine. And now the ending belonged to me. The crowd rose in confusion. I rose in power. He caught up to me in the hallway just outside the ballroom, breathless, disheveled, desperate. "Camilla, wait, please, just let me explain." His voice cracked, the performance finally slipping. I turned slowly, not out of sympathy, but to see the man behind the mask one last time. "Explain what?" I asked, calm as ever. "How you planned to break me. How you thought marriage was a leash and I was the animal to be trained." He blinked fast, trying to form excuses out of air. But I had nothing left to give him. No outrage. No tears. He tried everything. Apologies, denial, even charm. Said it was just a joke. Said I was overreacting. Said we could fix this if I just didn't blow it out of proportion. I let him speak. Let him unravel. Because I wanted him to hear himself. How small, how predictable, how pathetic it all sounded when stripped of confidence. I didn't yell. I didn't raise my voice once. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just silence. A woman staring down a man who underestimated her and choosing to walk away anyway. When I left the venue, the air outside hit me like a first breath after being underwater. Cold, clear, real. I didn't have a suitcase. I didn't need one. I had everything I needed right there. My voice, my dignity, and the choice to never let anyone rewrite me again. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I just walked, one step after another, deeper into freedom. What he tried to destroy had only made me sharper. He thought the story ended at the altar. He had no idea it was just the prologue. The days that followed felt surreal, like waking up in a different skin, one that finally fit. I expected whispers. I expected backlash. What I didn't expect was the flood of messages. Women I hadn't spoken to in years. Strangers from across the country. They'd seen the clip. Someone had recorded my toast, and within 48 hours it had gone viral. I was suddenly everywhere. The bride who walked out. The woman who exposed the bet. The one who said no with a smile. And instead of shame, I felt clarity. At first, I stayed quiet. I didn't need the noise, the interviews, the headlines. But as I read each message, the ones from women who stayed silent when they shouldn't have, who gave too much, who shrank to fit someone's mold, something lit up inside me. It wasn't just about me anymore. It never was. That moment at the microphone, that wasn't revenge. That was a mirror. And the more people saw it, the more they saw themselves. And that's when I realized I had something to build. So I did. I called it Untrained. A platform, a resource, a rebellion wrapped in purpose. Legal tools, emotional support, financial education, everything I wish I'd had before the fall. Not just to leave someone, but to never lose yourself in the first place. I built it slowly, carefully, brick by brick, and every time a woman wrote, "This helped me leave," or "You gave me courage," I knew his bet didn't just fail. It funded a movement. I used to replay that night in my mind, the aisle, the vows, the silence after my speech. At first, it haunted me. Then it empowered me. Now, it simply reminds me of the moment I chose myself. Not over love, but over illusion. People still ask if I regret anything, if I miss him, if I wish I had handled it differently. The truth is, I don't. Because what I lost that night doesn't come close to what I gained. I didn't just walk away from a man, I walked back to myself. Eric faded the way men like him always do. Loud at first, then bitter, then irrelevant. He tried to spin the story, of course. Claimed betrayal, humiliation, even emotional sabotage. But the world had already heard the real version. And more importantly, they believed it. Not because I cried, or begged, or made a scene, but because I stood my ground. Calmly, publicly, completely. He underestimated the weight of a woman's voice, and the way a quiet truth, told clearly, can set the whole room on fire. So now, when I tell my story, whether on a panel or through a post, or in the eyes of another woman deciding whether to stay, I say this: he bet on breaking me, but I didn't shatter, I sharpened. And from those shards, I built something stronger than love. I built a life, I built a legacy, I built an empire.